we're going to record each week, or Naili and I are going to try and record each week a little summary of the week. So a podcast, and as the weeks develop, we might invite other people to come in and be parts of those conversations. So this is a new initiative we thought we'd try out as a way of, I don't know, highlighting the key things that we thought were important of the week, or the things that struck us, or the ideas that we got, or what we think you should have, what are the takeaways from the week that we'd like you to be aware of. So you were mentioning, so we've had a bit of a discussion beforehand, and Naili was mentioning the issue of learning outcomes and the relationship of technology to learning outcomes. Do you want to say more about what you thought about that, Naili?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the takeaways from the sessions this week is to think about how it is that we as teachers use technology in the classroom. And when we are able to do so, what the pedagogical purposes are. Are we using technology because it's something that we're excited about, or are we actually letting the learning purposes to drive our sessions and to use technology in a way that enables us to achieve those purposes? So it's not necessarily an issue of technology, but how we use that technology in the classroom to achieve all those pedagogical purposes that we set out to achieve by the end of the year, by the end of the semester. And that's one of the things that we discussed in the session, that I think is important to go back to it, because I know that we're going to be going through different technologies, and we might get excited about all of them, but also thinking about, is this possible in my teaching classroom?
Yeah.
We were mentioning, and I think that this also came up in the sessions, that there are teaching contexts where mobile phones are not allowed. So you might be really excited about mobile learning, but how do you actually are going to do this if this is not possible in the classroom?
Yeah, so those are the sort of, I mean, we talked about the socio-cultural perspective, and those are the constraints that the environment puts on us. So if a Ministry of Education makes a decision that it's not going to allow the use of mobile learning across schools, then that can be constraining. But if we have a strong belief that we think that this is a good thing, then maybe we can use them external to the classroom. So maybe we can't use them in the classroom per se, but maybe you can set up tasks and activities that are done outside of the classroom. So that's something to consider. So it's sort of, if you are excited by a particular idea, just because it's not allowed, in inverted commas, it doesn't mean that you can't think about ways of kind of getting around that or doing something, because it's for the benefit of the learners. So ultimately, you're trying to balance, the needs of the learners. So you're trying to encourage them, trying to get them excited about language learning so that they're successful and they can actually communicate effectively, with each other and externally, to real people, if you like, outside of the classroom. So, it has a benefit. So that's what should drive you. So maybe if you can't do it in one way, you do it in another way. So, and that's the sort of, I think that's an important consideration. Yeah.
On this point, I just remember that not long ago, back when I was working in Mexico, they introduced tablets into the teaching context, for primary schools, secondary schools. But then the tablets were just there for a long time, because then teachers didn't have this digital literacy, worried about damaging the equipment. So all those tablets were there without any use. But I wonder if back then I had all the knowledge that I have now, if I had proposed myself, to do something with this, I wonder if the program could have been successful within that school, because nationally, it completely failed. And that's another thing. We are doing this MA, and you may have an issue in the context that people, other teachers, the school cannot solve. But if you could do that through this training, why not thinking about how can you contribute to your own teaching context now with the knowledge that you're going to be acquiring in the sessions?
Yeah, I mean, it is true that there is a tendency. I mentioned in one of there's a picture of what's called the FATI project in Turkey, and obviously that's similar in somewhere like Mexico, and we see big projects like that. So the introduction of technologies into schools. So there's clearly an expectation on teachers to do these kinds of things, but it's finding your way through that so that you can actually do something meaningful. So it's not, you're not just using technology for technology's sake. And the trouble with those kinds of projects is they tend to reinforce people's negative attitudes. Oh, it doesn't work. We were given these tools, but there was no material, or the internet didn't work, or whatever it happens to be. So, it's going back to, okay, we've been given this tool, in what way can we use it? It's like a textbook. I mean, textbooks are only as good as the teachers and learners that use them. They're not, they can be a massively blunt instrument if you, work boringly through, exercise 1, exercise 2, chant a bit of this and do that. They're of no use whatsoever either. So you have to be a bit creative. And again, that often you have this problem that again, the inspectors or the Ministry of Education, they say you must complete all this material, and the exams expect you to complete all this material, but it doesn't make for exciting lessons. So these are the sort of constraints that we need to think about, and they're equally true with technology as they are with other forms of, with digital technologies as they are with other forms of technology. So even though, we're focusing on digital technologies, we are conscious that all of these things are tools. So everything that we use in the classroom is a mediating tool. And we as teachers use those tools to mediate our practice, to make our practice, hopefully to improve our practice in order to achieve the learning outcome. So, yeah.
And on that point as well, I think as we start thinking about how we're using technology as a mediator to learn the language, how we're also enabling students to carry on this conversation or this learning outside the classroom, so that they know, if we make that separation of, technology cannot be used in the classroom, or we just follow the textbook, we're kind of sending a message there, technologies, you can't use technology for teaching a language. So, and that's not what we want to do here. So how you incorporate it in your life, because it's already incorporated in our lives, well embedded everywhere, and how do you use the technology that is available for the purposes of learning, so that students then can go outside and apply that learning outside the language classroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if we're looking forward to subsequent sessions, I've just been reading some material about learner autonomy, and it talks about, and there have been some recent articles. Nikki Hockley, for example, has an article about the ways that students are now independently seeking out material for themselves. So even if we don't use it, we're going to find our students using it. So one of the dissertations from last year, for example, explored the use of extensive reading apps, and it was really interesting. I mean, she didn't, the student didn't sort of explore learner autonomy particularly, but it was clear from what she was talking about, that these students were doing these things from their own perspective. So they were finding things online that were not being done in the classroom because they recognized the sort of their need for that, and they were sort of exploring them. So, this is exactly the point, the connection between, the realities of classrooms, and classrooms are often, as we said, they're these constrained spaces, often full of people, whereas actually learning is not like that. Learning's not constrained, and the technology kind of allows us to do that. So it allows us to do a variety of different things.
And I think what that book does for those interested in the assignment as well, is that it does talk about the topic of autonomy, but also incorporates elements of technology. So it's an interesting book to read and to hopefully trigger ideas.
That's a very good point, that it's the link between ideas of autonomy and ideas of technology. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for in the assignment. So if you've had a chance to look at the assignment, you'll see that it's situated. So what's your context? It's about ideas that you might get from literature. And it's about, well, how do I translate this through technology? How do I use technology as a mediator to bring that into having a real impact on the learning outcomes of the students? And that's essentially what we're about on this course unit. So, okay, so we'll stop there for today. And as we said at the beginning, we're going to try and do something like this every week to kind of bring out what we think are sort of interesting ideas, key ideas, and bring in your ideas as well, things that people have said that we thought were useful and interesting. And we'll put these up on Blackboard for you to listen to, so as an additional resource.
Thank you for listening to us. See you next time.